So this evening we're going to be talking about project management. It's something that a lot of businesses use to try to improve their business. And if you have ever worked in the corporate world, you're bound to have come across some kind of project management details. But even if you don't work in the corporate world, project management is a good thing to have a good understanding of, because at one point or another, all of us play the role of a project manager.
Like our fellow Toastmaster Jeff Thomas, who, as many of you know, is a project manager.
Project managers have to juggle a lot of things at the same time, and they have to keep an eye on the clock, and that's something that all of us have to do at one point or another. And there are all of these methodologies out in the business world that are used for project management that are helpful to be aware of when we do our projects. But when you start looking into those methodologies, it becomes very, very confusing very quickly, because it's a very broad and very deep subject. There's even an organization, an international organization, called the Project Management Institute. And what they do is they try to set up some sort of stability in the world of project management so that everybody speaks the same language and they have a good understanding of the way things are supposed to run. This way it goes smoothly in the office. They print this book in 12 languages. It's called the Project Management Book of Knowledge, or some people call it the PMBOK Guide. What this does is it tries to give that language and the steps and the processes so that everybody's on the same page. This book is almost 1,000 pages thick. So that gives you an idea of how broad and how deep this subject of project management is. We're not even going to scratch the surface of project management in this short time that we have together. But what might be helpful is if we just take two examples of two methodologies and compare them with each other, and that will hopefully give us just a general understanding of how project management can help us. And the two types that we're going to look at, one is a traditional type and one is called Agile. The traditional one we're going to look at is called Waterfall. It's the oldest and most popular one. And Agile Scrum is very popular as well today. Waterfall, we'll start with Waterfall. It's started in the 1950s. It was very popular with construction and manufacturing projects. They call it Waterfall because there's a strict order to the process. You have your requirements gathering, you make a design for the project, and then you implement the project. Once the project is done, you test it. Once it's tested, you deliver it, and after it's delivered, you do any kind of maintenance that's necessary. And you have to follow this path, and that's why they call it Waterfall, because it goes down like that. If you have to stop midway for some reason, you got to go back to the start and go again. So that's the Waterfall method. And there are several variations of this. You might see one that has 7 steps, some with 5 steps, but they're all pretty much very similar. They use the example of a house. You can't put the siding on a house until you get the studs up, and you can't put the studs up until you have the foundation in. Well, it's the same thing with waterfall projects. And so, usually, waterfall projects have just one project manager. Again, it has to be strict order. You can't change midway. You have to have all of your requirements right at the start, and then you just do them. And if you have to change anywhere in the middle, it can be disastrous. Those are the requirements of waterfall. But what if you do have changes? Or what if you don't have all the requirements right at the start? Or what if the client didn't really quite understand the requirements at the start, and at the end they get the project and they're disappointed because they didn't understand what the requirements were? These are all some of the problems with waterfall. And so, Agile Scrum attempts to address those problems. And what Agile Scrum is, it's a process that repeats itself over and over again, like a week to 4 weeks long. And then you start another sprint. It gets its name from rugby, and rugby teams are a tight-knit group of people who work together. That's the idea of Agile Scrum. You get a team of people who work together. The role of the project manager is split into 2 people. You have the Scrum Master, and then you have the product owner. The Scrum Master takes care of all the organization for the team and getting the processes done. The product owner makes sure that all the requirements are in place. And that really is a good process, because now the product owner is solely taking control of what the client wants, and the Scrum Master is solely taking control of getting the team to work efficiently. And then you got the rest of the team. You got developers and designers and QA people. Whatever it takes to get the project done, that's the rest of the team. But you try to keep the team small. You want to be small enough to be nimble, but large enough to get the job done. Agile Scrum You don't build a big house. Instead, what you try to do is you take the project and you break it down into small projects. So that wouldn't be practical for a house, because a house is a big project. But for things like software development or certain types of manufacturing, you can break it down into little parts, and then each of the parts becomes a sprint.
So let's take a closer look at what a sprint actually is. Before a sprint starts, the product owner and the Scrum Master will get together and discuss the scope of the next sprint. They will put together a backlog, or what you might call a to-do list. Then the team will meet as a whole and will discuss the goal of the sprint and what they feel they'll be able to accomplish for the sprint. The team will get to work carrying out the tasks. Each day the team will meet at what's called a stand-up, 15-minute meetings where each member of the team will discuss what they did yesterday, what they plan to do today, and if there are any blockers that they have to prevent them from progressing with their tasks. At the end of the sprint, the team will review and have a retrospective where they discuss what went well and what didn't go well. Hopefully at the end of the sprint, they're able to deliver the product that they set out to build at the beginning of the sprint. Then they do it all over again. And this process actually can be very productive and very efficient.
Some of the advantages of Agile. The client gets regular updates. The client's in on it with the product owner the whole time. Whereas with Waterfall, they sometimes don't hear anything until the project's done, and that could be months. And by the time those months pass by, the requirements may have changed. The customer's like, hey, I can't use this anymore. The world has changed on me. So the client can make changes at any time. If a change is not good, maybe you wasted a sprint. You wasted 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's not a big deal. Whereas if you waste a whole quarter, that's going to show up in your revenue. It's a very team spirit oriented process. So what you want to do is you want to work together closely. Even though there are titles like developer and designer, everybody tries to help everybody else on the team to get things done. So that's a really very advantageous thing. And then at the end of the project, the sprint teams can change. You can have one developer go to another sprint team and vice versa. So this way it doesn't get into a rut and it gets a little more exciting. So some of the disadvantages, just out of curiosity, has anybody ever worked in an Agile Scrum team here? Okay, obviously Jeff, yes, and yeah. So I've worked on several different ones, and some of them are great and some of them are not so great. And there's a lot of variables that go on that determine whether or not they're good or they're not good. One of the ones that I experienced, several of the members were co-located. And so when we would have our meetings and get that team spirit going, they'd be on the phone and they weren't feeling the love. And then there's some types of jobs that just don't work well with this 2 or 3 week process, like a house. So there are several things that you have to really consider before you jump into Agile or Waterfall or any of the other methodologies. And there are many methodologies out there. And it really would be worthwhile to review what they are if you are involved with projects on a regular basis, because what that will do is it'll help you to know what the tools are out there and the processes that can help you to get your projects done more efficiently. So again, see, these are some of the other methodologies that are out there: Kanban, Six Sigma, Critical Path Method, Extreme Programming. There's lots of them out there.
So hopefully this very brief comparison between traditional Waterfall and Agile Scrum methodologies has given you an understanding of the very broad and very deep topic of project management.
So that's the end of the presentation. I hope you enjoyed the project management brief discussion.